Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. Today we have pro-revenge stories and our first story of the day is by E is for Elbow Smash. Mess with my Christmas? Pardon me as I ruin yours. This slow burn starts a full year and a half before my plan came into effect. Earlier in the year, my dad quite sensibly suggested that with the size of our family Christmas party, we skip a generation with gifts to ease the financial strain as the extended family grew. At the time, I was struggling with my business and athletic career, and my wife, then girlfriend, was working on her second master's degree, so I suggested names from a hat, but he wanted to spoil all his grandchildren. I said fair enough, I'll chip in for Oma's cruise and buy gifts for my step-siblings, but don't expect anything grand. Dramatis personae for that Christmas party. Me, 28 years old at the time, heavyweight mixed martial artist and strength coach, aka small-time athlete working a day job to barely make rent in addition to training full-time. Martha, stepsister, 40-ish, an aging mombi whose only assets are starting to sag too much for them to be assets anymore, leaving her with no other definable personality traits. Jane, my oldest niece, 12, stepsister's daughter, imagine the most vapid tweenager stereotype you can and multiply it by 1,000. Tim, my oldest nephew, 9, stepsister's son, living proof that you're never too young to be an a-hole. Robert, stepbrother, 36, formerly cool dude who gave up on life when his kids were born, years later would gain back enough willpower and gumption to physically assault his wife. Tammy, 6, bro's daughter, sweet and shy girl, terrified by my mere presence, the wisest of the bunch in my honest opinion. Bubba, 7, bro's son, a generally nice kid who at this time was partway into evolving into an a-hole after constantly being told to look up to and emulate Thing 2. Tammy has brought a Nintendo DS and all the kids are struggling to see/play it together, so I foolishly offer to loan them mine to lighten the load. Tammy agrees to share with Jane and Bubba agrees to share with Tim. Having stupidly deprived myself of my means to escape social obligations, I go to the living room to acquire that much older cure for not wanting to deal with other people: alcohol. Not even having had time to pour a dram, my trained ear picks up from the kids' room the unmistakable sound of one human being pummeling another. I politely suggest to Robert that he might want to go have a look, but bro hasn't given two craps about anything in about 7 years, so he waves it off and I go to investigate. I walk in to see that Tim may be an a-hole, but is not untalented, and is managing to strike, shove into a wall, and kick Bubba all at the same time, while attempting to play my DS with his other hand, having decided his turn began the moment I left the room. Jane has simply wrestled the DS from Tammy, who is now sitting in the corner crying. I shout for Martha, informing her that if she doesn't get in here to break things up before I count to 10, I would have a stern conversation with them. She turns up and separates the kids and I retrieve my DS. Instead of giving Tim a lesson on sharing and not hitting people, she proceeds to berate Bubba, the kid who was beaten, for not simply giving up the DS to her little piece of crap and making her son look bad. Jane simply lets out a tweenage sigh for the ages and tosses the other DS into the crying Tammy. I then excuse myself from the party, thinking whatever gods may be that I don't have to provide gifts for any of those little craps. 6 months later, my firm belief in atheism is confirmed as bro calls me and this conversation ensues. Robert says, "Hey OP, while I really appreciated the gifts last year, you really should get something for the kids this year instead. Christmas is all about the children after all." I say no, I turn up to chat with you and Dad and Oma. I really don't give two craps about the kids. "That's a mean thing to say about my kids, don't you care about them?" "You cared about them so much that at the last party, you couldn't be bothered to break up a fight where your son was being beaten bloody." "Tim is a good kid. Martha said he just had a bad day." "He was literally beating your child. You didn't put pics on social media for a week because of the bruises. If Tim were an adult and had that kind of bad day, I'd have had a stern conversation with him and convinced him peacefully to lay on the floor until the police arrived." Well, stepsis and I were talking, and we think you should buy stuff for the kids next year instead of us. Well, I'm happy not to buy you anything, but I'm not getting crap for Martha's little craps, especially when she encourages that behavior. Well, if you aren't going to get something for all the kids, you shouldn't get anything at all. It's not right if you don't treat them equally. Done. Now, I'm sure they wish it has been this simple, but unfortunately it wasn't, and I certainly wouldn't have written such a long-winded story if that were the payoff. Thanks for bearing with me so far, we're almost at the end. A few months later, about 2 weeks before Xmas, I get an email from my dad with links to various toys, mostly from Toys R Us, which still existed at the time. When I call them back to ask what that's all about, this conversation ensues. Hey, what's up? I got your email. What's that all about? Dad says those are gifts for the kids for Christmas. I say that's cool if you're getting them that. I'll see them when the kids open them. He says no, that's for you to get them. I say I don't buy for that generation, remember? And I already sent you my contribution to Oma's cruise. He says you need to get stuff for the kids. Don't you want them to look up to you as an uncle? I say not really. Also, what part of my life suggests to you that they ought to look up to me as any sort of role model? You'd be better off telling them to grow up to be rock stars. He says, not the point. Christmas is about the children. If you don't get them this stuff, I won't put your name on the card for Oma. I say that's a crappy thing to do considering I already paid into that. Will you get the stuff or not? Well, guess my name isn't going on the card then. This will cost me more than a month's rent. So you can take this list and grease it up real nice. Dad interrupting, calm your jets, this is what they want. I'll get them a token something, but I'm not taking out a loan. Fine, just make it something they enjoy. If what I get doesn't put a giant smile on each and every one of their faces, I'll buy you dinner at a steakhouse of your choosing. That's the spirit, talk to you later. So, Christmas rolls around and my wife and I have bought not just one, but 4 gifts for each of the little ones and wrapped them all beautifully. My dad correctly assumes it's all probably from the dollar store, but it's nicely wrapped and he gives me a look of approval as I place it under the tree. My wife and I schmooze for a bit and then suggest that since we bought us several gifts for each of the kids, why don't they open one each before dinner so they have something to do while they wait? Their parents, of course, agree as it gives them more of a reason to ignore their kids and talk about them instead. So they send us off to hand out gifts to their kids. Martha is looking especially smug. As they begin to unwrap them, I prepare the camera as my wife goes for our coats. And I stick around just long enough to immortalize on film the big poop-eating grin on each of the kids' faces as they see what their gift is. Less than 1 minute later, the first blast from the air horn, Tim's gift, can be heard in the hallway clearly by my wife and I as we make our way to the elevator. I have no idea how much of the bulk pack of the silly string, Tammy's gift, or the 36 rainbow pack of off-brand Sharpies, Bubba's gift, ended up on the walls, but I do know they repainted the place the next month. Whether or not the pile of slap-on bracelets we got for Jane ended up on the wrists and legs of the parents as they tried to contain the other 3 will be left to the imagination, but I like to think they all ended up in the height of 80s fashion before Boxing Day. I may never know if they opened the rest of their presents. Everyone got a copy of each other's gifts, for fairness, plus a bunch of gross and mildly inappropriate temporary tattoos. In the confusion, none of them noticed either me or my wife leaving. I'm certain at some point they did notice the pretty gold envelope addressed to the parents on the tree. Inside was a very pretty card, blank, but with the following note. This was a warning shot from off the top of my head. I've got a whole year to get creative for next time. Merry Christmas, E. I never bought anyone steak dinner. However, I enjoyed several more Christmases with my Oma and Dad until they passed and I stopped seeing that side of the family at all. No mention of this incident or gifts for the kids was ever made again. Was this just about the best gifts you could give to these kids to totally ruin and annoy the parents? I'm thinking the only thing that may have been missing is something that's super glittery so it just gets all over the place and you'll never be able to clean it up. Let me know in the comments down below if you think that's the top of the line stuff or if you got some other ideas for some delightfully devilish gifts. Our next story is by Helsfossa, Karen gets mad at the way I bag her clothes. I used to work at a discount department store, the name that rhymes with boss. If you're unfamiliar, we buy the clothes from the big stores that don't sell, and we sell it for a fraction of the price. We actually had some decent stuff that was priced close to the thrift store. The thing is, they make their money by understaffing and hoping to sell high volume. As we were understaffed, we didn't do the fancy folding and boxing that you might see at a Macy's, just a normal plastic bag like a grocery store. This story begins during the holidays when all retail is a nightmare. I was cashier and trying as hard as I could to get people through the long line, having worked 8 hours with no breaks. Remember, understaffed. When this woman takes a giant cartload of clothes, think 3-foot pile of clothes, and throws it on the counter, I start trying to untangle this giant mess she made and scanning her items in. When I ask if they found everything all right, she cuts me off and says, "Can we hurry this up? I've got important things to take care of, and I don't have all day to be here." Now, it was 10:30 p.m., 22:30 for you across the pond, on a Tuesday, so I can't imagine what big-time events she was planning at being at. Then she looks down and practically screams, "What the F, you oaf? You're going to ruin everything. Take everything out of the bag and feed them nice." Now, a couple things here. I'm a big dude. At the time, I was 19 and only working there because I lost my college football scholarship for D-line due to injury. Think 6'4", 330 pounds, and could run the 40 and 5.0, so not a flabby 330. Also, when I put clothes in the bag, I was a bit nicer than my coworkers. I tended to do the half-loose fold and set them in the bag. Nothing fancy, but trying not to seem aggressive. Again, big dude, so it's easy for people to assume aggressive. I was completely thrown off when she yelled. At this point, I dealt with annoying people, but not a full Karen. I've generally always been able to keep composure, so I took a breath and calmly told her, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we don't do folding here. That tends to be more of a Macy's thing. I'm trying to be respectful of your purchase though, I promise." Still unhappy, she then utters the song of her people, "I want to talk to your manager. I don't like your attitude." Luckily, I had my favorite shift on duty that night, who I had to call over, which sucked with this giant line of people backing up. She came over and told the lady the same thing, that we don't fold clothes and we try to be careful. Karen then wants my job for ruining her clothes and a discount for having to deal with this crap. My manager just tells her she does not see anything wrong, but she'll go over to CCTV later, her way of getting rid of them. I then give her the total and she pays, complaining the whole time. She then takes the bags and dumps them back on the counter, looks right at me, and starts folding her clothes neatly, one by one. At this point, I was done. I was so tired and annoyed, but there was nothing I could do. She just stood there and folded each thing. Remember, she had a 3-foot pile worth of clothes. After 10 minutes of my manager and I trying to get her to leave, and her not letting us touch her clothes without her slapping our hands away and yelling at other customers who tried working around her, she was done and left. Here comes the petty revenge. Emphasis on the petty. About a week later, she comes in again with another, slightly smaller pile of clothes. She plops her clothes down and says, "I hope you learned how to fold clothes." This automatically puts me on edge. I look at her, take her stuff, scan it all through, and shove it all in one bag as one giant mess and set it on the counter. This time she grabs it, calls me a few choice words, and leaves. I then send a message to all my coworkers about her and that they should do the same. A few weeks later, and I see her go through another line, and my coworker shoves all her stuff in a bag. This kept up every time she came in, and every time I'd see her get huffy and walk off. I know it's not some big, amazing payoff, but to know that every time she came in, she would leave annoyed with her bagging. She still yelled at us for anything and everything, but we always had that nice little F you as she left. Again, sorry about the length, but it's nice having a place to put this story. She must really like the pricing or the clothes there for her to keep coming back even though she gets so pissed off every single time. Either that or someone needs to teach them the definition of insanity. And our final story of the day is by Darth Raider Vader. Take the car I paid for? Good luck finding the dead fish in it. When I was 15, I began working, and by the time I was 17, I had enough money to buy my first car. Me being young, when my egg donor and stepdad said they were titling it in their name for insurance and registration purposes, I didn't question it. 6 months later, they're divorcing. When the divorce is finalized, my egg donor informs me that my car that I paid for was going to my ex-stepdad in the divorce, since it showed at joint property between them. I was furious. The car looked nice on the exterior, but burned through a quart of oil every 2 days and drove like crap, but it was still my car. The week before my ex-stepdad was due to pick it up, I quit putting oil in it. I drove around town extra that week. I was that smoke cloud in town of burning oil. To top off my revenge, my friend had a goldfish die. It was a pretty big fish, 3 to 4 inches long. I asked for it. The morning of the car being taken, July mind you, I cut the yellow foam beneath the passenger seat. The foam was sticky, abrasive, and resealed easily due to the stickiness. I cut the foam and stuffed the dead fish into the padding and pushed it as far over as I could, then the foam stuck back together nicely. He showed up with his girlfriend. Girlfriend was the mistress, thus causing the divorce, and he made a big show of giving her my car as a gift to her. I just smiled. I wish I knew how well the car went over. Hours later, in the hot July weather, but I can imagine. It's definitely a small-scale revenge for having to give up your whole entire car, which is pretty crappy to have happen, but most likely you completely ruined the experience of anybody being inside that vehicle, probably forever. I doubt they're ever going to be able to get the stank out of that car, especially if they can't locate where it's coming from. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today, so if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.